In the late summer of 1835, New York City was a metropolis balanced precariously on the edge of the modern era. It was a city of sensory extremes, transitioning from a colonial trading post into an industrial behemoth. The streets of Lower Manhattan, particularly the tangled warren of the newspaper district around Nassau, Spruce, and William Streets, were a cacophony of commerce and construction. The air was thick, not merely with the humidity of an Atlantic August, but with the particulate matter of a city burning coal for industry and wood for cooking. But the most pervasive scent, the olfactory signature of 1835 New York, was biological. With over 150,000 horses operating in the city, pulling omnibuses, private carriages, and heavy drays, the streets were coated in a layer of manure that turned to blinding dust in the heat and a slick, treacherous paste in the rain. The crossing sweepers, often children, would clear paths for a fee, but the sheer volume of organic waste, estimated at millions of pounds daily, defined the urban experience. Amidst this sensory assault, a new sound had begun to dominate the rhythm of the district: the mechanical heartbeat of the steam-powered printing press. The Industrial Revolution had arrived in American journalism, and its temple was the cramped, ink-stained office of the Sun. Benjamin Henry Day, only 25 years old, stood at the center of this revolution. Born in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1810, Day had apprenticed in the print shops of New England before coming to New York. He possessed a keen understanding of the shifting demographics of the city. The old blanket sheets, the sixpenny mercantile papers like the Journal of Commerce or the Courier and Inquirer, were sold by subscription to the wealthy elite. They contained shipping news, political diatribes, and dry commercial data. They were irrelevant to the growing mass of laborers, immigrants, and mechanics who now populated the city. Day's innovation, launched in 1833, was simple but radical. The Sun would cost 1 penny. It would be sold on the street, cash and carry, and it would shine for all, as its motto proclaimed. To make this model viable, Day relied on volume. The profit margin on a penny paper was razor thin. Revenue had to come from advertising, and advertisers paid for eyes. This necessitated the adoption of the Napier double-cylinder steam press. Unlike the hand-cranked Washington presses of the previous generation, which required strenuous physical exertion to produce a few hundred copies an hour, the steam press, powered by a chugging, hissing engine, could throw off thousands of copies with machine-like precision. The machine itself was a marvel of the age. It was a chaotic assembly of flywheels, leather belts, and cast-iron gears. When running, it produced a rhythmic thump, hiss, clank that vibrated through the floorboards of the Sun's offices. It was a hungry beast, demanding a constant stream of paper and ink, but more importantly, it demanded content. Sitting across from Day in the sweltering editorial office was Richard Adams Locke. Born in East Brent, Somerset, England in 1800, Locke was a man of significant intellectual pedigree. A direct descendant of the philosopher John Locke, a claim he sometimes made, though genealogically disputed, he had been educated at Cambridge and had brought with him to America a radical political sensibility and a deep skepticism of established authority. Locke was a man of science and letters, currently employed as a reporter for The Sun, covering the police courts. This work, though lucrative for circulation, Day had pioneered the printing of sensational crime stories, was beneath Locke's dignity. He spent his days chronicling the petty miseries of the city, the drunkards, the thieves, the domestic disputes. However, Locke's mind was occupied with higher things. He had been following the current trends in astronomy, specifically the writings of the Scottish theologian and amateur astronomer Thomas Dick. Dick's works, such as The Christian Philosopher, argued for the plurality of worlds, the idea that every celestial body, including the moon, must be inhabited, as a creator would not make empty worlds. Dick went so far as to calculate the population of the solar system, over 21 trillion, based on surface area. To Locke, this was not science. It was a corruption of science. It was speculation masquerading as fact. He saw an opportunity to satirize this credulity while simultaneously solving Benjamin Day's circulation problem. The urgency for a sensation was driven by competition. In May 1835, James Gordon Bennett, a sharp-tongued Scot, had founded the New York Herald. Bennett was a formidable rival. He was aggressive, cynical, and brilliant. He had begun to revolutionize financial reporting, offering the first money articles that analyzed Wall Street with a critical eye. The Herald was gaining ground. Bennett's biting wit and willingness to attack the social elite made him popular. Day knew that the Sun, with its reliance on police reports, risked becoming stale. They needed a story that would capture the imagination of the entire city, not just the working class, but the educated elite as well. "The public is hungry, Ben," Locke observed, watching the steam press churn out the day's edition. "But they are tired of the gutter. They want to look up." Locke proposed a series of articles purporting to be a reprint from the Edinburgh Journal of Science. The choice of journal was calculated. The Edinburgh Journal had a high reputation for scientific rigor, but crucially, it had ceased publication a few years prior, a fact Locke gambled that the average New Yorker and even most rival editors would not know. "We will say it is a supplement," Locke explained, "a special report on the findings of Sir John Herschel at the Cape of Good Hope." Sir John Herschel, the son of the legendary William Herschel, discoverer of Uranus, was indeed in South Africa at that very moment, cataloging the stars of the southern hemisphere. He was thousands of miles away, reachable only by a months-long sea voyage. He was the perfect silent protagonist, famous, authoritative, and completely incommunicado. "We will give them science," Locke said, his eyes gleaming. "We will give them optics, mathematics, and engineering. We will bury them in detail so dense they will not dare to question the conclusion." Day listened, calculating the risk. If exposed, it could ruin the paper's reputation. But the Sun was a penny paper. Its reputation was built on entertainment and accessibility, not the stuffy veracity of the six-penny sheets. "Do it," Day commanded, "but make it undeniable." Locke retreated to his study to construct the hoax. He knew that the credibility of the discovery rested entirely on the credibility of the instrument used to make it. He could not simply say, "Herschel saw the moon." He had to explain how. Drawing on his knowledge of optics, Locke invented a device that sounded plausible to the layperson but was scientifically nonsensical. A hydro-oxygen microscope applied to a telescope. In 1835, hydro-oxygen microscopes, which used limelight to project magnified images of small objects onto a screen, were a popular scientific novelty. Locke conflated this projection technology with telescopic observation, suggesting that Herschel had found a way to infuse artificial light into the telescopic image, allowing it to be projected and magnified to an immense size without losing clarity. He wrote of a lens cast from crown glass and flint glass, measuring 24 feet in diameter and weighing 7 tons. He described the transport of this behemoth from the glassworks in England to the Cape, pulled by teams of oxen. He introduced a fictional narrator, Dr. Andrew Grant, a supposed student of Herschel, to serve as the voice of the report. The level of detail was exhaustive. Locke described the mounting of the telescope, the systems of pulleys and levers used to maneuver it, and the exact geographical coordinates of the observatory at Feldhausen. He was building a stage set so elaborate that the audience would forget they were watching a play. As the publication date approached, the activity at the Sun attracted attention. The newspaper world of Nassau Street was small and porous. Typesetters drank together, newsboys gossiped. Rumors circulated that the Sun was sitting on a major scientific exclusive. Enter William Finn. Finn was a reporter for the Journal of Commerce, the Sun's ideological opposite. The journal was a serious, expensive paper that prided itself on commercial accuracy. They viewed the penny press as a vulgar annoyance, On August 24th, the day before the first installment was set to run, Finn arrived at the Sun offices. He found Locke reviewing the final proofs. "We hear you have a packet from Edinburgh," Finn said, standing in the doorway. The noise of the steam engine made conversation difficult, requiring them to shout. Locke looked up, guarding the papers. "We have many packets, Mr. Finn." "Don't play coy, Locke. The Edinburgh Journal, we know you have it. The Journal of Commerce intends to reprint the findings. It is scientific data. It belongs to the public domain." This was the danger. In the absence of strict copyright enforcement, rival papers often lifted content wholesale. If the Journal of Commerce reprinted the story, they might scrutinize it more closely than the Sun's typical readership. Worse, if they demanded to see the original physical journal to set their own type, the hoax would be exposed immediately. "You may reprint," Locke said, thinking quickly, "but we have the exclusive rights to the first publication. The original document is not here." "Not here?" Finn stepped closer, suspicious. "Where is it?" "It is with the engravers," Locke lied. "We are commissioning lithographs of the diagrams, the lens schematics, the lunar maps. The engravers are working around the clock at a shop in New Jersey. They have the journal to reference the sketches." "New Jersey?" Finn scoffed. "Who is the engraver?" "A specialist," Locke said, vague. "Look, Finn, you will see the publication tomorrow. You can copy from our sheets if you wish." Finn narrowed his eyes. "We prefer to work from the original. Errors in transcription, you understand. I will be back, Locke. Once your engravers are finished, I expect you to produce the Edinburgh Journal." "I shall place it in your hands myself," Locke promised, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Finn turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Make sure you do. The scientific community will want to verify the math, optical dimensions of that scale. They will require proof." Finn left, leaving a heavy silence in the room. The narrative thread was now pulled taut. Locke had bought time, but he had also set a deadline. He had promised a physical object, the Edinburgh Journal supplement, that did not exist. When Finn returned, the game would be up. "He suspects," Day said, emerging from the press room. "He suspects nothing but selfishness," Locke corrected. "He thinks we are hoarding news. He doesn't suspect we are manufacturing it." "He will be back," Day warned. "Let him come," Locke said, returning to his proofs. "By the time he returns, the world will be so enchanted that the truth will not matter." Tuesday, August 25th, 1835. The morning of August 25th broke with the typical humid haze of New York summer. But on the streets, the atmosphere was electric. The newsboys, Day's Sun Boys, were deployed in force, their shouts cutting through the morning traffic of drays and carriages. "Great astronomical discoveries," they cried. "Sir John Herschel, Life on the Moon." The headline dominated the front page. "Great astronomical discoveries, lately made by Sir John Herschel, Doctor of Laws, Fellow of the Royal Society, and other honors. At the Cape of Good Hope." The genius of the first installment lay in its restraint. A lesser hoaxer might have started with the aliens. Locke started with the budget. He detailed the funding of the expedition, the collaboration with the Royal Society, and the technical specifications of the telescope. He wrote, "The weight of this prodigious lens was 14,826 pounds, or nearly 7 tons after being polished, and its estimated magnifying power was 42,000 times." The sheer density of the numbers overwhelmed skepticism. Readers on the street corners, merchants, clerks, laborers, struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the instrument, but they accepted the authority of the figures. Locke's narrative then addressed the primary scientific objection: optics. A telescope magnifying an object 42,000 times would typically render the image too dark to see, as the light is spread over a vast area. Locke provided a solution that dazzled the public with techno-babble. He described a conversation between Herschel and Sir David Brewster, a real and famous physicist, regarding the transfusion of artificial light. The theory proposed that by injecting extremely bright hydro-oxygen light into the focal image, one could project it onto a canvas screen, much like a magic lantern, but with the fidelity of a telescope. This hydro-oxygen microscope principle was the key. It converted the telescope from an eyepiece instrument into a cinema projector. The readers were told they were not looking through a lens, but looking at a screen where the moon was projected in living color. The narrative moved to the first night of observation at the Cape. The tension was built masterfully. The great lens was hoisted. The atmospheric conditions were checked. Then the moon came into focus. The first things described were not cities, but geology. Locke described basaltic rock, lunar oceans, and beaches of brilliant white sand. He described a country of amethystine mountains and slender pyramids of natural rock. The description of the vegetation was the first hint of life. We perceived a large declivity covered with flowers, of a dark red color, the first organic production of nature in a foreign world. In the coffee houses of Wall Street, business halted. The Journal of Commerce editors read the Sun with a mixture of envy and confusion. The detail was precise. The tone was academic. "It reads like a botanical survey," one broker noted. "It must be genuine. No fiction writer would spend so much time on the mineralogy of rocks." Thousands of miles away, at the Feldhausen estate near Cape Town, the real Sir John Herschel was indeed working. He was cataloging nebulae, observing Halley's Comet, and sketching the local flora with his camera lucida. He was completely unaware that in New York he had just become the discoverer of a new world. He was unaware that his reputation was being used to sell penny papers to Irish laborers and Wall Street bankers alike. The disconnect between the quiet, disciplined work of the real astronomer and the noisy, sensational discovery in New York created a dramatic irony that underpinned the entire affair. By the afternoon of August 25th, the Sun's entire print run had sold out. Day ordered the presses to run late into the night. The Herald, Bennett's paper, was silent, caught off guard. The Daily Advertiser and the New York Times, the 1830s version, began to prepare reprints, validating the story as news. Locke watched from the window. He had hooked them with the rocks. Now he had to reel them in with the beasts. Wednesday, August 26th. Friday, August 28th. The following days brought a crescendo of revelations. Having established the geology, Locke began to populate his world. He did so with a careful gradation of wonder, starting with the familiar and moving to the fantastic. The second installment introduced the lunar bison. In the shade of the woods, we beheld continuous herds of brown quadrupeds, having all the external characteristics of the bison, but more diminutive than any species of the Bos genus in our natural history. These miniature bison were described as having a fleshy hump and being very agile. Next came the lunar goats, creatures of a bluish-lead color with a single horn. Unicorns, in effect, but described with the dry taxonomy of a naturalist. The graceful trooping of these single-horned goats, in the valley of the unicorn, was a spectacle of high beauty. The third day brought a shock that rippled through the city. The telescope had swept over a region of water and islands. There, the observers saw creatures that resembled beavers, but with a startling difference. They walk upon 2 feet and carry their young in their arms like human beings. Locke's description of the bipedal beavers was a stroke of genius. He described them living in huts, constructed better and higher than those of many tribes of human savages, and, most critically, noted the presence of smoke. "Smoke!" cried the readers on the street. "They have fire! They have technology!" The beavers were described as living in communities, engaging in social behavior, and even showing signs of a primitive hierarchy. This was the clean society the prompt required. No wars, no violence were described among the beavers, only industry and order. While the public marveled, the scientific community began to mobilize. At Yale College in New Haven, two prominent figures, Professor Denison Olmsted and the young mathematician Elias Loomis, were following the reports with intense scrutiny. "The biology is extravagant," Loomis remarked, studying the sun's descriptions. "But the optics are the primary concern. If Herschel has achieved this magnification, he has overturned Newton." Olmsted and Loomis determined that they could not rely on the newspaper extracts. They needed the data. They resolved to travel to New York. Their mission, to find Dr. Andrew Grant, view the original Edinburgh Journal supplement, and verify the mathematical appendix that the Sun claimed to have omitted. Their departure for New York added a ticking clock to Locke's narrative. He was now being squeezed from two sides: the rival press, Finn, and the Academy, Yale. Back at the Sun, the physical machinery was pushed to its breaking point. The steam press ran for 10 hours straight. The circulation reached 19,000 to 360 copies, the largest of any daily newspaper in the world. Benjamin Day was ecstatic. The money was pouring in. Advertisers were clamoring for space. But Locke was beginning to feel the strain. He had to write the next installment, and he had to top the beavers. He had to introduce the masters of the moon. He consulted his notes on Thomas Dick. Dick had predicted that the inhabitants of other worlds would be more perfect than humans, closer to the angels, perhaps. Locke decided to give them wings. The fourth installment changed everything. It was no longer a story about animals, it was a story about people. The narrative described the telescope focusing on the Vagabond Mountains and a deep, ruby-colored amphitheater. There, the observers saw the ultimate discovery. "We counted 3 parties of these creatures, of 12, 9, and 15 in each, walking erect towards a small grove. Certainly they were like human beings, for their wings had now disappeared, and their attitude in walking was both erect and dignified." Locke named them Vespertilio homo, man-bat. He described them as being about 4 feet tall, covered in copper-colored hair, with faces of a yellowish flesh color, but it was their wings that captivated the public imagination. They possessed great expansion and were similar in structure to those of the bat, being a semi-transparent membrane, united at the back by the dorsal integuments. Locke was careful to portray the Batmen as a clean and noble race, fitting the strictures of the time and the user's constraints. He described them engaged in conversation, using varied gestures. He described them eating large yellow fruits, peeling them with their fingers. "They are doubtless innocent and happy creatures," Dr. Grant wrote. He described a great Temple of the Equinox, a structure of polished sapphire and gold. Unlike human temples, it had no roof and no altars of sacrifice. It was a place of pure communion with the universe. The Batmen were shown flying in great flocks, playing in the air and resting on the cliffs. It was a vision of a sinless humanity, unburdened by clothing, industry, or strife. The reaction in New York was hysteria. Crowds blocked the streets around the Sun office, waiting for the next edition. Lithographs of the Batmen and the Ruby Amphitheater appeared in shop windows. The New York Times wrote that the discoveries were probable and possible. The Daily Advertiser stated, "No one can doubt the truth of these details." Even the skeptics were silenced by the sheer volume of facts. The Journal of Commerce remained silent, but Finn was watching. He saw the Yale professors arrive in the city. He saw the cracks forming in the story, the lack of corroboration from Europe, the silence of other scientific bodies. Locke knew he had to end it. He couldn't keep the moon in the sky forever. He needed a way to close the curtain before the actors were revealed to be puppets. In the final installment, Locke executed his exit strategy. He wrote of a tragedy at the observatory. One night, the astronomers, exhausted by their work, forgot to lower the lens cap. The sun rose over the cape. The massive 24-foot lens, acting as a giant burning glass, caught the morning rays. The fierce concentration of the solar rays set fire to the observatory. The woodwork was consumed and the plaster of the walls calcined. The telescope was damaged. The observations were forced to cease. It was the perfect ending. It explained why there would be no more reports. It explained why the team was in disarray. It closed the window to the moon just as firmly as it had been opened. On August 31st, the day the final installment ran, the rain began to fall in New York. The heat wave broke, and with it, the fever dream of the moon began to cool. William Finn returned to the Sun office. He was not alone. He had heard that Professors Olmsted and Loomis were in town, asking questions at the city hotel. The pressure was critical. Finn found Locke at his desk. The steam press was silent for the first time in a week. "The series is done, Locke," Finn said, his voice hard. "The telescope is broken. Very convenient." "Tragic," Locke corrected, not looking up. "I am printing the story tomorrow," Finn said. "The Journal of Commerce runs the full text. But I need the original. Now, the engravers must be finished. There are no more excuses." Locke looked at Finn. He looked at the rain streaking the window. He was exhausted. The burden of maintaining the lie, of inventing the biology, the geology, the optics, was crushing. "You want the original?" Locke asked. "I must have it, to verify." Locke stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the city he had enchanted. "There is no original, Mr. Finn." Finn paused. "What?" "There is no Edinburgh Journal supplement. There is no Dr. Grant, the beavers, the bison, the batmen. They are ink and paper." Finn stood stunned. You fabricated it? All of it?" "I wrote a satire," Locke said quietly. "A satire on the arrogance of those who claim to know the mind of the Creator through bad mathematics. I intended it to be read as a romance. I never dreamed you would all believe it." "Believe it?" Finn sputtered. "The whole city believes it. The Academy believes it." "Then the city is a fool," Locke said, "and the Academy is blind." Finn rushed back to the Journal of Commerce. The next day, the Sun admitted the truth, or rather, they admitted it was a hoax with a wink and a nod, framing it as a grand literary experiment. The reaction was unexpected. Instead of rioting, the public laughed. They had been entertained. They had been part of a shared wonder. The circulation of the Sun did not drop, it solidified. Benjamin Day kept his fortune. The penny press had proven that it could command the attention of the world. Yale's professors returned to New Haven, perhaps embarrassed, but wiser. The real John Herschel, when he eventually found out, was initially amused but later annoyed by the constant questions about Batmen. Richard Adams Locke continued to write, but he never again achieved the height of that week in August. He had created a world and then destroyed it, all to sell a penny paper. As the steam press fired up again to print the retraction, the rhythm, thump, hiss, clank, sounded less like a machine and more like the heartbeat of a new age, the age of mass media, where truth and fiction dance together in the ink.